Mama. I'm Courtney Cecil, proud mom of 2 boys and an organizational culture and behavior change executive. And I'm a believer in building a movement to help the burned out, overwhelmed working moms reclaim their control and free time so that they can confidently remain in the workforce without losing the sanity or themselves. Now, let's get started.
Hello there. Welcome back to another episode of the Life Management System. And inside this episode, I'm going to do something a little bit untraditional. I'm actually going to air an episode where I was hosted on somebody else's podcast. So my friend Allison, she is a licensed therapist and works with women to empower them to be at their best. And she hosted me on her podcast, which is called Becoming Unstoppable. I'm actually going to link that in the show notes. But in the podcast that she hosted me on, so the name, to put things into perspective, was You Can Have It All, Let Motherhood Enhance Your Identity, Not Replace It. So when I thought of what might be best served on a holiday week, there is nothing that makes me happier than being able to bring this episode to you. Not only was it one of the most fun conversations I have had in being hosted on other people's podcasts, but it also allows me an opportunity to share one of my colleagues with you. So, in the land of entrepreneurship, it can get really lonely. And I am dependent on people like Allison that are really leaning in to be my coworkers and build me up and help keep my heart in it in a really big way. And Allison is that and then some. So I'm pumped about the episode. When I listened, it quite literally, guys, y'all, I was thinking this is my favorite one to date. So I'm very pleased with her willingness to let me air it inside the life management system. So, what we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk to you about how you can fit your kids into your life and not the other way around. Because again, you're the adult, you're the parent. I mean, think back to our lives when we were growing up as late Gen Xers, early Gen Yers, whatever it may be. We were fit into our parents' lives, not the other way around, but somehow our generation continues to let the world revolve around our kids. So I talk a little bit about that paradox. I also talk about signs to look for in burnout and some of the sneaky ways that your to-do list is probably causing you stress. So I hope you enjoy this episode. I hope you also check my friend Allison out on Instagram at A Note From Your Therapist. I am linking her podcast, Becoming Unstoppable, and her newsletter in the show notes. And I will let Allison take it from here. She's going to interview me. I hope you enjoy.
Welcome back to Becoming Unstoppable, the podcast, hosted by me, Allison Chapeau, licensed therapist, empowerment coach, and international speaker. Bringing you weekly expert guests, Becoming Unstoppable is a podcast for real-life conversations on life, love, wellness, mental health, empowerment, and everything in between. If you like this episode, make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and review. In this episode of Becoming Unstoppable, I speak to Courtney Cecil, head of culture at a Fortune 50 company and the founder and CEO of the Working Moms Movement. Not only is she a living, breathing example of a woman who is making huge moves and disrupting the status quo, but she has so much to offer on how to envelop motherhood into the beautiful life that you already have and stay connected to your identity. She brings powerful insight into how to let your kids fit into your life, not the other way around. Happy listening. Hey, Courtney. How you doing?
Hello, Allison. So good to see you.
Oh my gosh. So, I know our listeners don't know this, but this has been a very long time in the making of trying to get you onto this show. So I'm so very excited that you're here today. The first thing I wanted to do, I have so many questions for you and I have a bunch of things I want to talk about, but I've decided to do it just a marginally bit different. And I'm just going to let you introduce yourself before I even get into what I hope to talk about today.
Yeah, so before I introduce myself, I would also like to pull upon the thread of what you just said, Allison. So for perspective, you created an actual human in the time it has taken us to get together. So congratulations to you. Lots to celebrate. It's not just of us finally being able to have this conversation, but the fact that you have a not quite a newborn anymore. I mean,
she's not quite a newborn anymore.
She's kind of she's officially outgrown that situation, that status. First of all, congratulations there.
Thank
then
you.
congratulations to us for finally making this work. So as Allison just said, My name is Courtney Cecil. I'm coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina. I am a head of culture at a Fortune 50. And
Mm,
most importantly, I am the founder and CEO of a company called Working Moms Movement. So Working Moms Movement is a organization that helps both with maternity retention and working parent retention for companies. And I also work in the B2C space with clients to manage burnout
mm,
by being super tactical about how they manage their time and stress. So my own podcast and my signature program is called the Life Management System. And the
love
reason
it.
it's called the Life Management System is because I help people curate a system for themselves that completely orient their life around whatever it is that they value. Because
Mm,
what they value as an individual is different than what I would value or you, Allison. So it is a very individualized, internalized program. And I think that's so critical that you are doing you as opposed to doing life of somebody else. And that's, I mean, in America and keeping up with the Joneses and the accessibility of social media, like it is just like this
yeah,
toxic spiral in comparison that we put ourselves on. So part
yeah.
of my goal is to combat that. And it is that kind of thinking, Allison, that I got really attracted to you because I know that that is such a passion area of yours too, is
Hmm.
helping women really stand in their own for who they are.
Oh, that is so good. That is so juicy. And that segues beautifully to what I was wanted to start with.
We're just
So, we did it. Um, you know, I think the sentiment of like you doing you is it sounds cliche, and yet it is like a super powerful truth that most women don't embody, right? Like we do get caught off in that social media and we do get caught up in all the things that we can't do, that we forget to sort of align to our own core values, explore what's really important to us. And I wanted to share just like a little bit of a story before we start. So as you mentioned, I do have a 3.5 month old. And so, on a personal note here, my pregnancy was very planned. I'm 43 years old. I went through IVF, so there was like no surprises here. And so I'm a late mom, right? And something that came up for me in my decision making of becoming a mother was that everybody I knew, and like I'm largely going to say everybody, would always tell me all of the things that motherhood would take from me, right? And
Mhm.
so part of my identity is I am highly, I'd like to say I'm intelligent, right? I'm highly motivated. I'm hyper independent, which can get in my way sometimes. And I'm really I'm career driven. I'm very educated. And so it wasn't when people were sort of starting to tell me, well, if you become a mom, you're not going to be able to work the hours that you work. You're not going to be able to travel the way that you traveled. And I started listening to that, right?
Oh,
And, for so long of my motherhood journey, I would regularly say to people that I was very jealous of people who either definitely wanted to have kids or definitely didn't. And I was kind of in the middle, right? I like thought I wanted to be a mom, but I was so absolutely terrified of all of the things that I wouldn't be able to accomplish. And that was too scary for me. And so I pushed it off and I pushed it off. And so I'm going to ask your lived experience and kind of what your thoughts are on this. But, something that I have adopted now is when someone tells me, like, I'll give you an example, like, you can't travel with kids, right? What I now say is, you can't travel with kids, right? Like, don't make this umbrella
yeah,
statement for
yes.
me, right? Because actually traveling is such a huge priority for me. It's such a core identity. It's something that I wrap my whole life around, that losing that would be catastrophic to who I am, right? So I have to
Mhm.
become traveling with a child is way different. I just completed my first flight with my 3 month old, but this weekend, it looks different, but it is manageable. And I know that that's something that I looked at your website, and I was very inspired by the story that you told on there, that like while you were pregnant, you went to, 16 different places. Was it countries?
It was, well, both. I flew
Okay.
internationally and I also traveled to cities inside the US
Yeah.
because to your point, I wasn't slowing down. There's this is
Hmm.
my life. So, yeah, very
Yeah.
important.
And
And I wish that I had more of that influence and narrative when I was getting pregnant, when I was thinking about being a mom, even present day. And so, the fact that you have created, not only a website and Instagram account and a program, but like this is a movement. Like I love that you're saying working moms movement, because I do think that that is an appropriate word. So I would love you to tell us more about like, what does that mean? What have you experienced in your personal and professional life that kind of helps people if they're scared like me? Like, I can't do it. You're right. Everybody's telling me no. Like, what would you say to all that?
Oh, that it's bullshit. So let's start there.
Yes.
Because
Perfect answer.
so I actually feel myself in friction all the time, Allison, around this notion of you can't have it all versus you can't have it all. So right now, the rampant voice is essentially calling bullshit to you can't have it all. Like you can, but just not right now. And I also believe that's crap because I think you can. It just looks different. It
Mm,
looks different. It maybe isn't as good or as perfect as you used to have it, but you can. I have a business. I have my day job as an executive of a Fortune 50. I have two kids that are incredibly active. I have a very healthy husband and relationship with him. I travel all the time. I'm still willing to bet that 90 to 95% of my friends would say I am the most active person and engaging them. So I
mm,
think it can. It just is a matter of what you prioritize. And one of the things that I think is so important to appreciate that most moms do not is when you prioritize yourself and you prioritize fitting your kids into your life, it actually enriches theirs as well. And I think
mm,
that's where most moms get it wrong is that they cater to their kids and I can't do anything between this hour and this hour because my kid has to nap, or I can't do this because they're like, I just got back from my kid's party and I was recommending a restaurant, and the girlfriend I was talking to, she said, well, is that kid friendly? It's like, well, I don't know what you mean by that. I take my kids there to, like, is it Pizza Hut? No, but I
mm-hmm,
take my kids there, and I think that that actually shapes the kids. Your decision on how you approach that shapes the kids and the way that they show up in this world in a way that sometimes serves them and sometimes doesn't. And that's one of the
mm,
things that most parents are not cognizant of, that the decisions and how you bring your kids into the world will inherently influence the experience they have and how they experience it and what shapes them. So, as an example, I was, gosh, this was like, let's call it a month ago. Actually, it was over Thanksgiving. I went to go see a couple that just had their second kid, and their first doesn't know a stranger. She is so engaging. She's 2.5, and she holds her shoulders back like a freaking boss and will talk to anybody and is so social. But the reason she does that and the reason she's capable of doing that is they let their kid fit into their life instead of
mm-hmm,
fitting into hers. So they take her everywhere. He plays in a band as his second job, like that's his hobby gig, and she goes all over with them. She's going to the country club. She's going on the travel. She's doing all the things. And homegirl shows up like an adult, and like she's so much fun to be around because they kept doing them. And that's what
right.
I think. So really long way to answer your question, Allison. But I think that I have been super intentional with my kids fitting into my life instead of vice versa.
Mm,
And that goes back to, like, I have friends who and colleagues who will say, "Oh, my kid's sick. I can't attend that meeting." Well, sometimes that's really the case and your kid really is that sick. But oftentimes, like, I'm gonna juggle both of those in the interest of being able to continue forwarding my career and knowing that my kid can be by themselves for an hour without being entertained. That kind
mm,
of thing, that kind of guilt shows up a lot for moms. So I'm willing to bet a lot of what you're hearing is the projection of their own guilt that I just frankly don't have. And I think
yeah.
that is our generation. Our parents didn't have that kind of guilt. Like their generation
No.
didn't at all. I think that's our generation. So when I was making the decision on whether or not I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, which is what I always thought I wanted to do. To your point,
Mm-hmm,
yes, I always knew I wanted to have kids, but I also thought I always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And then I realized, no, there are other things that I do in life that I'm only able to do, like travel, that I can only afford to do if I work. So work has to
Mm-hmm.
be an important part of my life in order to solve for the most important things, which is providing for my kids, like
Mm-hmm.
the safety and security and the lifestyle I want them to have. And then the experiences of living, which is to us like manifest through travel. So
Yeah.
Allison, I think you're going to have a very promising future. And I think
Yes.
that like, you just need to earmuff all of that other narrative because it is fundamentally not true.
Yeah, I've never shared this story with anyone, so here we go. But I was so nervous, even through pregnancy, about just that again, that like identity loss, that I had a C-section. Unfortunately, I was in labor for 48 hours and it ended in a C-section anyway.
Oh,
But
oh,
when I was being like wheeled into the OR and my husband was not yet in the room, I was actually starting to panic and being like, well, I'm on the roller coaster now. Like the child is here, right? And I was panicking, like full blown, like we're about to do this, baby's about to come. Luckily, the end of the story is she's a delight. But I was
oh,
very scared, right? Because I hadn't earmuffed all of that narrative. And I think that's really wise advice. And I really like the sentiment of like letting the kid fold into your life. And I had a friend once, this story, I hope she's not listening, because she might know it's her. But this story has stuck with me because this happened like a decade ago. But a friend of mine was a new mom, and we were going to a mutual friend's house for dinner. And I remember talking to her, and I was like, okay, I'll meet you at our friend's house at 7 o'clock, whatever. And she was like, okay, well, I can only stay for a little while. You know what? I'm just going to get a hotel. I'm going to get a hotel because my kid, if they're not in bed by 9 o'clock, it's going to be chaos. Okay, but if I go to the hotel, I need to make sure I bring the diaper bag, and I need to make sure I bring the air diffuser, and I need to make sure I bring his fan and his sound machine and all of these things. And by the end of it, she was so anxious she couldn't enjoy the dinner. And I remember even in the moment, this is well before I had a kid, thinking, she's making it so much harder for herself. And I say that with a lot of love and no judgment whatsoever, right? But for me, I've been living part of the work I do with clients, having nothing to do with motherhood, is just staying flexible. I think I say a lot like just stress lives between expectations and reality,
oh, I
right?
love that.
You know, if we become more flexible, life becomes more flexible, right? And I
Mhm,
think that's like a glaring lesson
mhm.
in parenthood for sure.
Right.
And I think back to that, woman who was in her 20s at the time, maybe 30s. And I wish I could just give her a hug and be like, I promise the kid's going to be okay if it doesn't have its noisemaker, right? It might be a little
Yeah.
fussy, but you can do this, right? And I think a lot of it is we don't give parents, moms particularly, a lot of support, like staying flexible and again, aligning to your core value. What's your core value here? Maybe it's community and connection. And therefore, making sure that you get to see your friends is a fundamental part of maintaining your you-ness inside of motherhood, right? We can't just lose it all because that leads to burnout and exhaustion. I saw on your Instagram, I wrote it down, I like stole it and I was like, can I make an Instagram
Oh,
post? No,
that's so
that's copy.
funny because I just wrote down your quote to you, Allison, around both stress lies between expectations and reality, and if we become more flexible, life becomes more flexible. So we're just like we're just basking in each other's genius right now.
Well, your genius was, and I even wrote it down, burnout is not a badge of honor, it's a warning sign. And I thought that that was like mic drop moment here. And like for sure we can probably talk about this in all aspects of our lives, but definitely in like in motherhood particularly. And I know that you see a lot of clients, and I want you to talk about that basically are figuring out how to be both a mom and a career woman.
Mhm.
And, I hope this conversation applies to even women who, are stay at home moms. I think all of this is valuable advice. But because of this subset of clients that I particularly see, a lot of them, a substantial amount of them are like, again, sort of like me, to be honest, right? Like this high functioning, career driven person that doesn't know how to be a stay-at-home mom because they really want to keep that entrepreneurship or whatever it is about them, and they do burn out, right?
Mhm.
And so in the work that you've done, can you kind of talk to our listeners about, what might prevent burnout, or how do you notice it? Like what shows up when we're like, when is the warning sign flashing on our car.
Yeah, well, so I should say, you were talking to a mirror right now, Allison. I fall in that same bucket, and that's how I know. So I am a very high legacy Enneagram 3 that has shifted more into my 2 wing. So very high achievement oriented. In fact, achievement is my number one strength on Strength Finders. It just means I have a really hard time turning it off. And as my old boss used to tell me, he was the CEO, by the way, and for 2 reviews in a row for 2 years in a row, he's saying, the only thing I need you to do, Courtney, is learn to turn down the volume because I could not slow down. And he's like, this is an unsustainable pace. You're going to crash and burn. And the way that it manifested for me and the way that it manifests for many moms is in sleep because we have a hard time transitioning and turning our brains off. We are either it takes us hours to fall asleep or we're waking up in the middle of the night because our to-do list is consuming us. And for me, it was probably 4 straight years of crap sleep where if I'm lucky, getting 4 to 6. But as females, we need 8, 8.5. And the little I was getting was not quality. So that was the biggest indicator for me that something needed to change. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that the reason I couldn't sleep was not because of my kids. Like at this point, my boys have been sleeping for multiple years. It wasn't because of them like I thought it was. Apparently, it was because of the chronic stress. But it took me working with a nutritionist, like a general wellness nutritionist, who was able to help me figure that out. So we went through cortisol testing and that sort of thing, and my cortisol was sky high, and that was the indicator to me, like, wow, something really needs to change. But I also, knowing that my tendency is to run full speed, I also I at least was starting to get the wisdom and maturity that I needed to introduce controls in my life in order to start slowing things down. Because if you put me in the situation where I'm surrounded by my to-do list, the only thing I'm going to do is my to-do list. And that's the way that most women are, most moms in particular. If you are standing at the kitchen counter having a conversation with somebody, you're probably getting a little twitchy because you see a little spot there of coffee from the morning to like clean up. You can't just like be in the moment. So I think that all women that are 35 and up need to have some base of what their hormone level looks like, because that base will help you and serve you in the next 10 to 15 years as you near and move through perimenopause and menopause. So I think that just having a semblance of where your cortisol resides and what your hormone levels look like will help anybody. But for me, the symptom was bad sleep, but apparently the cause was my stress levels. And that, I think that very much is the case for most of the moms that I work with. The other big indicator is the inability to be at peace when you're not making forward progress. So I would say that probably 100% of the women that I work with fall in that category of not being able to sit still. And I'm still not good at it. Like, it is something I actively practice every day. It is a muscle. But the difference is I know how to effectuate the muscle. I know how to influence and put controls in my place to force my hand. And that's the kind of thing that I help people with. And a lot of that peace and the freedom, the time freedom, the stress freedom comes from being super clear on what you value. So that way, as an example, a very tactical example, because I value wellness, I have to sleep. I know that. I don't value laundry. So if I have to go to bed and my laundry isn't folded, old me would have gone crazy. New me is like, yeah, the laundry's going to be fine and it's going to be sitting there waiting on me tomorrow. So like sometimes it's just working through when you get like getting really clear on what those values and priorities are, because then it allows you to have an inner talk track to remind yourself what really matters more, and that tends to make it easier to let go of the noise and the things that don't actually serve you.
Oh my God, that's brilliant. I have something else that I saw on your Instagram. I'm just going to steal all your Instagram stuff that I want to talk about, and it relates to the to-do list because I think it's a really important point. But quickly before I get there, I was talking to my own therapist who specializes in motherhood and, career force, and she had run a small group cohort of 6 women, and one of the one of the sessions that we were having is we were talking about how to simplify our life. And before I hit that session, if someone had asked me to conceptualize like simplify your life, I would think in kind of like big terms. And the way that she described it and the example that she gave, which I thought was brilliant, she's like, I don't have time to do the dishes.
Mhm.
So I used to have these beautiful pots, beautiful pans, wonderful knives. I ditched them all. I went to like Target. I got the cheapest pots and pans. And
Mhm.
like I can now throw those into the dishwasher. And let
Mhm.
me tell you, that has freed up, let's say, 30 minutes a day, right? Like cumulatively, I've gone back like 10 hours a week, right?
Mhm.
That's amazing. And so I've been thinking a lot about how to simplify my life. And again, everyone's life looks different. Something that I've done, both with which do involve, money. I do Instacart. Although, in fairness to Instacart, I think I save more on the coupon clipping that I would never do in real life than I do on the tip and the
Well,
service
not to
fee.
mention it's harder to impulse buy.
Totally
So,
harder. Like, absolutely. Right. And I like have to think about it more often, but I do Instacart and I also have a cleaning team that comes to my house. And those are ways that I've simplified my life. But to transition to what I saw on your Instagram that I thought was really an interesting point, and I'm going to quote you here. It actually said, a healthy to-do list is productive, but an unhealthy to-do list leaves you feeling like you'll never catch up no matter how hard you try. Is your to-do list helping or hurting you? And again, I felt a little mic drop there, because I do think when we think of to-do lists, it's like we want to be writing to-do lists. But
mhm.
I know when I write a to-do list, and certainly I can say this of my husband, it can feel really overwhelming, right? Like
Mhm.
I get like, oh my God, there's so many things to do that I almost lose the motivation. So my question for you is, how would a person know like how to simplify their lives and how if their to-do list is hurting them? Like what would that look like?
Yeah, so let's start with the healthy and unhealthy to-do list. So what I notice, and I used to fall in this camp too, a lot of very left brain driven people. I'm an engineer by trade. Also, speaking of professions, Allison, I can't help but pausing and calling a timeout and saying, I, you acknowledging my own, like I have a therapist too, and this is what I do. This is you saying essentially experts use experts. And
Uh-huh.
while you are very conditioned to be able to talk track your own way through things, you're essentially saying too, like for me to be at my best, I also need people to help elevate me. So I think that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And for being very transparent and vulnerable with your audience and what it like how you are able to be at your best, because that is also the type of service that you help provide others. So that's beautiful. Okay, so going back to the healthy versus unhealthy to-do list. As a left brain person, I was naturally inclined to add things to my to-do list just to see myself check it off. Like, you go, girl, look what I did, like, go me. But part of that narrative and what that does for me is it continues to reward productivity. And not to say there's nothing wrong with that as a legacy type 3 Enneagram. I am used to achievement. I'm used to chasing things, but that also is perpetuating my inability to turn myself off. And that doesn't serve me and it does not serve my family. And if anything, very similar to the conversation about you coming back with into like rejoining the world with a child now and realizing it doesn't have to be scary, and letting your kid more like mold into your life. I know that for myself, my to-do list were not actually serving me in any way, shape, or form. But more importantly, they weren't helping my kids because they were seeing a stressed mom. They were seeing a mom who didn't have time to prioritize them because I was prioritizing all this other stuff that actually at the end of the day was not a priority. So, one of the things that, like, before I talk about the elevation of a healthy priority list, one of the things that I like to think about to really understand what priorities are is if something changed tomorrow, if like my mom's best friend, unfortunately just passed away, and I wanted to be able to go in to see my hometown for a very unexpected day trip, the day before I went to Aruba on a girls trip, to be able to support my mom and support that family. If something like that happened, that's a priority to me. I'm going to figure out how to be there and how to support them. And when that happens, all of this other noise that just is kind of collecting around me can just sit. And sometimes, yes, it's stuff I really want to tackle and do, but oftentimes it's stuff that's going to be there tomorrow or the next day or the next day. So, one like really extreme way to think about your to-dos is it something that fundamentally needs to get done today if there's an emergency situation like that. But moreover, if you're going to be realistic on the day-to-day management, those the to-do list elevation really needs to hover at, does it matter if it happens on a particular day? Or is it something that I really need to get out of my brain, because if it's not there, I'm constantly going to think about it. So as an example, let's pretend you have a pet and the pet food gets shipped from Chewy. And if you don't forget to kick out, like to check the levels of the food and kick out that delivery date, if you have enough, then you're going to end up with 3, 4 bags from Chewy that you don't really need. Like that's an example, that time bound example of something that I might put on my to-do list, because, hey, I need to remember that 2 weeks from now, I need to check my dog food and see whether or not I need it now or whether I need to kick back that subscription date. So that's a healthy to do. And I'm going to put it on my to-do list. I'm going to add a reminder to it, and it's going to go off the day I need to check it. So it's just out of sight, out of mind. Another example is you have an obligation to follow up with somebody at work. For example, you and Susie, I don't know who Susie is, but apparently she's got the to-do that I give her. So I give Susie a to-do list. And I'm like, Susie, you have 2 weeks to get this done. Get back to me if you have any questions. Well, I'm going to set a reminder for 2.5 weeks from now to say, hey, if I haven't heard from Susie, I'm going to follow up with her and see what's up. Because for me, I'm entrusting accountability to Susie, but I need to make sure that she actually accepted that accountability and she's doing what she needs to do. So that is an example of another thing I would add to my to-do list, because I have cared for it, but the follow-up, the ability, the need to check in with her is still there, but I need to not absorb that in my mental load. I'm going to make a to-do. I'm going to set a reminder for that. But so that's all healthy to-do list elevation. The unhealthy kind of stuff is, hey, I need to remember to call to get new mulch down for my yard. Like, you're going to remember that, I promise. Or I need to remember to order batteries for my battery operated candles. Like, I don't know, all of that like ticky tacky stuff at the bottom. I promise you're going to remember it. You're not going to forget it. The to-do list is going to be in your face every single day. Even like a different type of elevation in work might be what's a good one at work? To remember to print something for this meeting you have coming up. You're not going to forget to print it. Just don't add it to your to-do list. Like those little things, when you look at your list and you see that it's long, then it controls you. And that's where it starts to become unhealthy. But also, so often that stuff is aspirational. So as an example, here's a perfect example. Every single year, I go through all of my pictures on my phone and I create an album of all the highlights that I then put on a digital frame in my kitchen. It's something that brings me joy to see all of the highlights from that year on that digital frame. I'm not going to forget to do that, but if I add it to my to-do list, all of a sudden it's masking the things that actually are time bound that I do need to care for. But two, it's just burdening my shoulders. It's making me feel like I have this thing I have to do that, honest to goodness, doesn't need done. That's a delighter task. That's something that is aspirational for me. I like to do it. And one of these days I'll get there. But adding it to my to-do list would only detract from the things that really need my attention and also just feel heavy. And it just doesn't serve me.
I'm going to steal from my own personal life, like a delighter task. And as you were talking, I was thinking about, my own to-do list. My husband lives by his to-do list. And so something that, we were up against this, like creating the to-do list that was too long. And something that I've actually removed from his to-do list, similar to your picture frame. Unfortunately, my dog passed away, who I love very, very much recently. And I wanted to create kind of like a memorial for him. So I bought a shelf and I just wanted to put like his picture and like hang his leash near my door so I could see it. And we haven't had time for this, right? and we keep adding it to the to-do list, adding it to the to-do list. And now it almost seems burdensome, right? Like it's not like this sweet memorial that's going to bring us hopefully like a little sorrow, but some joy. It's like, ugh, it's another thing that we have to check off. And when I removed it from the, like physically removed it from the to-do list, I suddenly felt lighter about it. Right. And my
Oh,
mom came, she's visiting, and she came in and she's like, where's Doozer's shelf? I thought you guys have been for 2 months. You've been saying you're going to put up the shelf. And I was like, you know what? We're going to get to it when we get to it. And what's
yeah.
like you said, I'm not going to forget to do that. And it's also not time sensitive at all. Right. And a mantra that I'm sure I've said ad nauseum on this podcast, but I will repeat it until the day I die, is like, my anxiety tells me lies and it creates urgency that doesn't exist. Right. I don't need to have up that shelf. Right. I don't even need to do the laundry, right? Like I have enough underwear. Like I like to do the laundry because I have cute little outfits that I want to wear and put on my kid. But like those things can take a back burner. And I think for everyone who's like, you know, type A, like control freak, I say in a loving way, you know, it is really difficult to allow and give permission to start taking things off of a to-do list. But I agree with you. I think if we actually looked at like everybody who's listening now, pull up your to-do list and like circle the things that are actually time sensitive and meaningful and or urgent, you're going to find so much of that stuff really is just noise. And, you know, what I try to encourage clients to do is, you know, if you're having a lot of resistance about letting things go, like reframe it a bit, right? Yes, you're letting something go and that's going to be difficult because you're used to doing something a certain way, but think about how much you can bring in then. We can't bring things in unless we let things go. Cliche, but truth. So, you know, the fact that I don't have the shelf up, no big deal, but it did mean that I got to like go on vacation this weekend without any like hanging, lingering, you know, I don't know, guilt. Yeah, I guess guilt,
Yeah.
right? That like I
Yeah.
haven't clicked off all my to-do list. I left with a clear to-do list because I actually managed my to-do list and only like what was on my to-do list before I went to Oklahoma? Pack, right? Like, yeah, I needed to
Yeah.
pack. That's time sensitive, time bound. I like your way to say it. But I think that that's, you know, again, to this like greater philosophy on how to simplify your life. It's not only learning how to like manage time more effectively, but just kind of resetting your mind that things aren't as important as we often think they are, right? And that is a hard thing to let go of if you are a career driven, you know, high achiever kind of person.
It is, but at the same time, as you just acknowledge, Allison, that in order to get one thing, you have to give up something else. You get to
Mm-hmm.
go to Oklahoma, or you get to stay home by yourself and do the to dos. Like, what do
Yeah.
you really like? What do you really want to do?
Yeah.
Oklahoma or to do list? And that's often that's the internal battle that women tend to have that men tend to not burden themselves with. So
Mm-hmm.
almost always, my clients are frustrated because the men in their lives, their husbands are like they're kicking back at the end of the night and putting up their feet. And the women are the
Mm-hmm.
one like on the little hamster wheel being like, but look at all the stuff we can still get done.
Yes.
And there's like I I wish, I'm so jealous that we weren't born with that level of inner peace, but it just means we have to intentionally manage it for ourselves because nobody else is going to do it. Society will continue to take from you as long as you're willing to give. So
Mm-hmm.
the only thing we can control is our response back. And that's our responsibility. It's not society's.
Yeah, I live and die by that sentiment, which is my response is my responsibility. And I say that also at nauseum. Like, we cannot control what the world offers us, but we can control what we decide to respond to. You know, and I get a little bit on my feminist platform, but if you're listening to this podcast, you already know I'm a feminist. So here we go. But it is true. I do see like a very discerned difference between, you know, the men in my life and the women. I often give the tell clients this story, and I've said it on podcasts before. But last Thanksgiving, my husband was in charge of green bean casserole. And so, you know, days and weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, I was like, did you get all the ingredients? No, 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 no. It's finally like the day before, it's 9 p.m., the day before Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving Eve. He goes to the supermarket. He comes home with all the wrong ingredients. There's like 4 ingredients in green bean casserole. You would think that like he nailed it, but he did not. So not only did we have to get up in the morning and like find a grocery store that was open and buy it, and he did, but he bought it an hour before we left. So he
Ugh.
literally showed up to Thanksgiving with the ingredients for green bean casserole and then like put it down. And I was thinking to myself, what it would look like if I was in charge of that, right? There's
Mhm.
no way I'm like committing to making apple pie and showing up with the ingredients to apple pie,
Mhm.
right? At the end of the day, though, he wasn't wrong, right? It's like, all right, he put the ingredients, he shoved it in the freaking oven. It was fine. We had green bean casserole at the dinner. But women overthink that. Like the idea that I would show up and like not have it prepared, it would be overwhelmingly stressful for me. And so I think, like he didn't even, there was no anxiety or stress in his life at all over this event. And I meanwhile, I'm mortified.
You're
It's like,
exactly. You're the one that's frustrated, right? But I think that there's just like, well, one, women tend to care a lot about our brand. And
mm,
that pressure starts in elementary school. And that's really sad. Like everything about a women's brand, as early as elementary school, starts with a lot of physical attention on what you wear, what you look like. Right now, I've heard horror stories from my neighbor who has an elementary school age girl about parts of like your part in your hair. You part it the wrong way, probably presumably like I'm parting it like a
I was like, what's my part?
as opposed
Yeah.
to like the mid part. But like that becomes a reason to get picked on. So stuff like that in a very early age perpetuates this standard that women internalize themselves and this level of brand we feel like we need to build and that we owe to society. And that is also bullshit because men don't feel like they know anything to society, nor should we. If we can be really firm in who we are and what it is that we value, who cares what other people's
Mm.
standards are? Like those are their standards. If they want to, I, by the way, I would also be mortified and I would also really care about. So like, don't misread this. But at the same time, I think that there's like pulling from the standards of your story, Allison, and the now like pulling from that analogy is that was a standard. There are standards that women create and superimpose on ourselves that society, if they do care about it, it's not their business. And
Mhm.
half the time we think they care and they don't. And the other half the time, if society cares, who do, like if it's not hurting you or your family, like good riddance.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's so much of the work I do with clients, and I've named this podcast "Becoming Unstoppable," which, albeit, is a really cheesy name, but here we go. It landed in the market research. I think it's like when we think of something like unstoppable, it feels very like heroic, larger than life, but really unstoppable is simply just like showing up in your own effing life, like knowing what you need and what you want, and giving yourself permission to go after it. And it kills my soul about how many people I know, personally, professionally, otherwise, particularly women, that just don't know how to show up for themselves, right? They do get lost in comparison bias. They do get lost in imposter syndrome. They do it all for everyone all of the time. And, to you know your boss's point, it's unsustainable. It's not, you can't keep running at that pace, so something has got to give. And something I say to myself is I need to learn how to slow down before I burn out, right?
Mhm.
And because life will stop me if I don't slow down, right? Whether it's like I'm going to get sick or I just can't manage my calendar, or so becoming more aware of, again, the things that in highlight here, like the things that are actually important, the things that are actually time sensitive, and most importantly, the things that align with core values. And, I think if the listener, if someone's listening right now, and I hope you are, like when we say things like core values, it's it's really like the things that are deeply important to you, right? So for me, for instance, it's like connection is really important, generosity is really important, empathy, non-judgment, right? It's like what is actually important to you. And when you're looking at your to-do list or you're looking at your life, it's like, are these things aligning to your core values? Doing the laundry, right? It's like, does that matter to you? And maybe some people would say, like, yes,
Mhm.
actually, cleanliness is like top of my core values. For me, it's actually not, right? I have a lot of grace for myself now.
Mhm.
I don't want to live in filth, right? But it's like right now, as we're speaking to each other, there is a whole entire sink full of dishes that I will get to hopefully tonight, maybe tomorrow. We'll
Yeah.
see. Right. And it's like letting go of those little things to not only just like make time and make time on your to do list, but just give yourself a fucking break. right?
Yeah.
Women do not give themselves a fucking break.
Yep.
And I think that is like really fundamentally what I want to instill upon every woman. Like you had said in again, I'm like, I never do this, but I'm just like quoting all your Instagrams. Um, but I love it. There was one that you posted. It said, "Here's the truth. It's not that I don't have time. It's that I wasn't making the right things a priority." And I really want the listeners to like home in on that, even if I'm repeating it. And I want to like beat it over your head. And you actually gave some examples, and I love them so much that I want to share them. But you said, "I do have time for a quick workout, but only if I stop scrolling on my phone. I do have time for self care, but only if I say no to the things that don't serve me. I do have time for connection with my kids, but only if I stop obsessing over the house being spotless." And I think those are three really like, we're not just taking a philosophy. Someone can actually see and hear, like, oh, you know what? You're right. I do have time for a quick workout, but it means giving up scrolling and comparing on Instagram, which is a mind fuck anyway.
Yep.
So, I think, sort of as we wrap up here, major takeaways that I've certainly learned from you and I see in my own life is just how the mindset of how we are conceptualizing our life is the most important gift we can give ourselves. And again, always it sounds cliche. I can't help but keep saying that because I can hear myself say it and I get a little nauseated when I say it. But it's like if we tell ourselves we can't do something, we can't. That just shuts the door. It becomes like that's the end of the road. It's very immobilizing. It's an impasse. If we start to sort of look at our lives and say, okay, this is going to look different. I might have to ask for more support. I might have to let things go. We suddenly have a softer, more compassionate approach to our life, which actually makes us more productive, right? Like if the goal is productivity, you being more kind, compassionate, and flexible, I'm just going to like underline flexible, actually manifests productivity.
For sure. For sure. And that's, I think about my energy levels now because I'm getting good sleep and because I'm doing, like, I am actually making myself available to work less. My energy levels are higher because of it. My mental acuity is higher because of it. Therefore, my output is higher because of it. So it all kind of hangs together. I don't have all of I have the physical energy, probably also because I work out, to be quite honest, now in ways that I didn't, but also because I have my mind is cleansed. Like I'm very clear on what it is I need to spend my time on. I'm hyper focused on that, and the rest of it's just noise, and the noise doesn't get me down in a way it used to. And I think part of that is certainly just acknowledging reality and being able to face that head on. But of course, I think there's also part of it that is the wisdom and maturity that comes with age. But it doesn't have to be like that. There are ways that you can kind of sort through that muck earlier in life. And I just wish that I would have had resources like you and me, Allison, that hit this kind of thing head on because I needed that external pressure to let it go in ways that I was not capable of superimposing on myself.
Yeah. Well, and with that said, I thank you for acknowledging that I see a therapist. I do, I think this is a fundamental truth of life. We can get places on our own. We get places faster when we cut the learning curve by finding people who are ahead of us who can really instill some values and some support. So, with that said, I would love to offer your services to our listeners. Where can they find you if they're like, okay, yeah, I want that, but I need someone to guide me?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Well, I have my own podcast, The Life Management System. I mostly go solo on that because I try to keep them super snack size. So people are getting in and getting like stress and time management related uh, pieces of advice very quickly and consumably. You can find me on Instagram. I'm fairly involved and engaged there at Working Moms Movement. I also am on LinkedIn as Courtney CA. So would love and welcome to connect with anybody that is here and would be very, very grateful for that level of engagement because this truly for me is very much a labor of love. It is something that I am so passionate about. And as much as one of these days, I hope it turns into a proper business. But right now,
Yes.
it is a soul project. It is a soul project because I care so deeply about helping women free themselves, helping working moms in particular, and particularly free themselves from these societal expectations that they continue to absorb and these standards that are just so unfair for themselves and frankly not sustainable. So I would really welcome the ability to connect with anybody who is willing to do so.
It's so good. Well, thank you again for your time. I'm so glad that we finally figured this out and we got to have this conversation.